This is Ed Petke with the Americans in Wartime Experience. Today's date is 6 October 2024, and I'm conducting an interview with Wayne Plager in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Sir, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you're from?
So I do have some, family, history, being in the military, because I was actually born in Honolulu, Hawaii, because my father had joined the Navy out of college. He had done, the AOCS down at Pensacola, and he was, flying, P2s at the time, Neptunes, with VP6, one of the patrol squadrons out at Barbers Point, Hawaii. And I was born in Hawaii while my, father was, stationed there in Hawaii as a Navy, flight officer at the time. So I kind of followed my father's, footsteps. He was in the Navy for, active duty just 4 years, and then he stayed in the reserves and ended up flying P3s in the reserves. And then, I grew up in New Jersey while my father was flying P3s in the reserves out of Willow Grove in Pennsylvania. And I decided, hey, Navy flying, that sounds great. So I went ahead and applied for an ROTC scholarship, which I happened, Navy was kind of generous enough to pay for my education. And I ended up going to Iowa State University for ROTC, and got commissioned, with my, shiny little ensign bars in the fall of 1988. So I was in college when Top Gun came out, so the huge rush of everybody wants to go be like Tom Cruise.
Right, and you were already going to do it.
I was already there, so in some ways I was ahead of the curve. And then later, all of those people joined the Navy in '86. So later on in my career, it was interesting because there was this kind of a glut of naval aviators that were like a year or two ahead of me, because I didn't get my wings. I went down, once I graduated from college, I went to Pensacola, the classic, training scenario. Went to Pensacola. I already had terrible eyesight, so I had no illusions of being a pilot, down in Pensacola.
Right.
So many people go down there and then they fail, their eye test, and then they can't be pilots, and they're all,
So how'd you sneak through there with the poor eyesight as a pilot?
Well, I wasn't that was exactly it. I wasn't a pilot.
Yeah.
I knew all along that I was not going to be a pilot. But I knew the only path for me to go flying as an officer was to be a naval flight officer. So at least I wasn't, like there were other people that did go down to Pensacola and they dreams of being, like Tom Cruise, Top Gun, 1988, and then they failed their eye test or hearing test or something. Or they have, they're colorblind.
Whatever, yeah.
And then we always called it the NAMI whammy. It was the Navy, aeromedical board. If they shot you down, you got shot down. But I just knew I had bad eyesight and everything else was great. So
was Navy always, since your dad was in the Navy, is that what geared you towards that branch of the service?
Yeah, very much so. And even so much, that, I knew my father had been a naval flight officer, so I knew that was, that it was possible. So that's one of the nice things that, hey, I knew what, was, within the realm of, possibilities. So I was able to go, hey, I'm going to go join the Navy. I went and got an ROTC scholarship. Hey, that's great. Navy pays for my education. Fabulous. And then, now here I am. Actually, I have a career, so that's also a nice thing. You graduate from college, you're like, hey, I have a job, because you get commissioned and off you go. And so I went to Pensacola, and of course they have you could choose, what platform, of course, you don't necessarily get to choose. You can apply, and the needs of the Navy are always going to pull, whatever. And so I actually, be careful what you wish for, because I knew my father had flown P3s. It sounded like a really neat thing, doing ASW. This was still at the height of the Cold War. This is like 1988, before the fall of the, Berlin Wall and those kind of things. So go track, Soviet submarines. That sounds like a neat, real world, mission, right? So I chose, well, I applied for P3s and I actually got P3s. So then I went off and did more training, went and, got my wings. So I was, happy about that. My father pinned my wings on me, so that was nice.
It's a nice honor.
Yeah. So,
kind of handing down the tradition.
Yep, handing down, so that's great.
So for someone who's watching this who doesn't know what a P3 is, can you describe what a P3 is?
Yeah, so P3 Orion, big 4-engine, turboprop, land-based, patrol aircraft, based upon a Lockheed Electra airliner from the 50s. So they first came about in the mid-60s. It was, always intended to be, anti-submarine, warfare, maritime patrol, and reconnaissance aircraft, MPRA community. You typical crew of 10, fairly common, mission profile. You go do a brief, you get, hey, here, go patrol this area. Typically for like ASW, hey, we think there might be a submarine somewhere out in the ocean. Here's a location or approximate location. Do a brief for about, 3 hours or so. You got pre-flight the aircraft, load up, gas. We would always load up sonobuoys. That's how we hunt, submarines, drop basically hydrophones from the plane. They land in the water. They listen for the submarines.
So are you listening to those in the aircraft, or is someone else listening to those?
No, we're listening to them in the aircraft. Okay. So usually have a crew of 10 for P3s. You usually had, 3 pilots. 2 pilots would be flying, and then you have a relief pilot because missions are about 10 hours long or so, pretty common, 10-hour mission profile. Okay. And then 2 enlisted like flight engineers up in the cockpit. Again, 1, actually in the seat, and then usually 1 as a relief, so that way they could rotate in and out. And then there'd be 2 like naval flight officers like myself. Usually had a navigator, communicator, so did all the navigation long before the days of like GPS and everything else. Right. You had like celestial navigation and charts and dead reckoning and those kind of things. Yeah, exactly.
Stone
like
Age,
pay
right?
attention. Yeah, exactly. Nowadays you're like, oh, who does that?
Sure.
And then you would have a tactical coordinator. They usually be kind of the mission commander, or the coordinate all the efforts of the people in the back of the aircraft, for the mission systems. And then, particularly for ASW, you usually had 2 enlisted, air crewmen. They were your acoustic operators. So they had a really neat system. They could dial up all those different sonobuoys. You could tune up, 16 or 32 buoys at a time, lay a big pattern. And then you just wait, typically wait for the submarine to come to you, usually just passive sonobuoys, lay a big, usually like a barrier or grid or, sometimes you lay multiple rows of sonobuoys. And then, especially if the submarines are that you think they're transiting, like, hey, they're going from point A to point B, you're like, hey, they're going to have to come through, especially, if there's like a choke point, like Strait of Gibraltar or something like that, right. You just lay them right in the middle of the strait, just wait for them to come.
A lot of anticipation of where you think they're going and their path.
Yeah, so a lot, the classic, many hours of tedium, while you're sitting there listening, and, there goes the oil tanker, here comes the whales and the dolphins, and then, finally, here comes the submarine, and then things get super busy really quick. Okay. Because now you have to start tracking. I should mention we also had a non-acoustic operator that ran things like the radar. Usually we had an ESM system to listen for, other radars, that kind of thing. Okay. And one of the things that we used a lot, for on the ASW side of the house, is he would have a magnetic anomaly detector, so that, if you flew low altitude and you happen to fly like right over the submarine, it's a big steel hole in the water, disturbs the magnetic field, and then he would have a little graph, old school paper graph with a little pen, and a pen, big swing back and forth, when you fly over the submarine, then yep, that would be, hey, there's a submarine that's right there, right now. So those sonobuoys that you drop in the water,
Are you hearing kind of like the pinging like you would hear if you were in the submarine from the sonar?
So, well, so we were usually passive, in that we would not ping, and we had active buoys that you could ping.
Okay.
But typically you just lay passive buoys and they just listen, and they're just listening to the sound of the ocean. And so, yeah, you can hear the oil rigs and, tanker ships. And
so you do it long enough, you can tell the difference of that's a whale, that's a whale, that's this kind of ship.
And then, of course, submarines, they're mechanical, particularly like nuclear submarines. They've got all kinds of pumps and gears and propellers, and
they're making a lot of noise under there.
They make noise, and they would try to keep themselves as quiet as possible, but they always make noise. But all of those different pumps and machinery and gears, they all make kind of unique, sounds. So every submarine sounds a little bit different from every other submarine.
Okay.
So that's where you can discriminate against, that's just, a cruise ship. And that's a submarine.
Okay.
So.
And could you tell based on the sound if it was one of our subs or one of their subs?
Yep. That was always one of the really important functions that the acoustic operators would have. That they would do a lot of training to be able to specifically say, hey, that's a Soviet submarine, that's a U.S. submarine. What type of submarine is it? Is it an attack submarine? Is it a ballistic missile submarine? Which version of attack submarine? Those kind of things. Because every submarine has a unique, basically acoustic, signature. Okay. So they did a lot of training, so that they could correctly identify those things. So, and then usually you would go into like a tracking scenario. Now you found the submarine, like, hey, that's, half the battle, but now you have to keep track of it. So now the whole crew gets really busy, because usually we would have like an ordnanceman, then they were the ones that pulling the sonobuoys out of the containers, putting them in our like little pressurized launch, tubes, and then firing those.
So they're not just throwing them out the plane. It's some sort of a launcher.
Yeah, there's a launcher. Yeah, there's a launcher to fire the sonobuoys.
Now, you're flying low enough where you're not. Is it pressurized?
Yeah, it's pressure. Yeah, the aircraft's pressurized, but typically we would fly at 200 to 300 feet of altitude.
Okay. Oh wow.
Yeah,
lower than you would expect.
Yep, nice and low. Turboprops are fuel efficient down low, so that was good for us.
Okay.
And also the time of flight, for the sonobuoys for them to drop, you could fly up at altitude like at 10,000 feet, but then it takes like minutes for the sonobuoy to fall out of the sky, and then it lands in the water. In the meantime, the winds blow it all over the place. It was a
little more unpredictable if it's landing.
Way better for us to be down at low altitude, drop a sonobuoy. You knew where it was going to land. It was going to land right away, and then the hydrophones would have to deploy, out of the the sonobuoy itself. And they've deployed at different depths. Submarines operate at different depths, and obviously oceanography and all of the sound refracts and reflects, and you have a sound gradient profile.
A lot different in water than it is in air.
Oh yeah, so temperature gradients are hugely impactful. So if he's like below the gradient, the sound is going away, so you'd want a hydrophone that's deeper. Or if he's in like mixed layer depth, he's in the surface, near the surface, you want to be there. So you want to set your sonobuoys, like what depth do they need to be at, where's the submarine at, and now the submarine's moving, you're dropping sonobuoys, ordnanceman's busy loading, we had an in-flight technician too, things are breaking, in-flight tech's breaking out the toolbox trying to fix stuff, and
so what does a typical sonobuoy look like? I mean,
they're about like 4.5 inches in diameter. They come in a canister, so they're about 3 feet tall or so. That weigh, depending on the version, 20, 30 pounds or so. They have a battery inside. They have a little float with a little antenna that's inside the float, so the float will be up on the surface, so they can radio the sound up to.
So something would deploy underneath. How deep would that go?
They can go down to like 1,000 feet. For the hydrophone.
Okay.
Because submarines are down deep.
Right.
The sound's going.
So attached to a cable.
Attached to a cable.
Okay.
Yep. So,
and are they recoverable? Or you just leave them? You just one and done.
Yep. They're
you get the data and that's it.
Completely disposable.
Okay. So there's thousands of these things floating around.
Well, they
theoretically.
sink.
Oh, yeah,
they
okay.
sink. But yeah, but
Eventually,
yes,
yeah.
I've launched tens of thousands of sonar
wow,
buoys
okay.
into the ocean, and yeah, they're still down there on the bottom somewhere.
Okay. How long would a typical battery be good for? Where you could listen to get data?
Usually you could set them for different life settings. So you could set them for like an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours.
Okay.
That's
And they're
about
constantly
max.
just
And they just
relaying
radio,
info.
they just, they're just listening. The passive ones are just listening, but then you had the active ones as well. And so those, did actually have a transducer, so you could command them. You'd radio down to the sonobuoy and say, ping now, and then it would ping.
Okay.
And then that is like kind of the classic, like you see the World War II submarine movies, ping. You would, now, but you can drop a whole bunch of them. So it's submarine, is trying to get away. You can drop them in front, drop behind, drop them to the sides, keep pinging them away. And then, submarine, the submarine are when you went and did exercises with like the friendly submarines, they were usually a little irate if you went, active on them, because now they get to listen to you pinging away, at them. So
how many of these sonobuoys would be on a typical payload on a mission you guys would go out?
You could carry, about 100 to 120 sonobuoys, depending on what year and fatigue life of the aircraft. At one point in time, we had, the floorboards in the back of the P3. You couldn't carry as many as you used to because we were exceeding the weight limit of the, part of the structure of the aircraft. But yeah, typically around 100 sonobuoys you'd carry on a mission. That was fairly common loadout.
So what are the typical duties of a flight officer on a plane like this?
So for P3, so if you were like the tactical coordinator, you're obviously telling the pilots, you would send them like fly 2 points, like, hey, you need to fly here to position the aircraft, because you got to keep, within, radio range of your little sonobuoys, but if you were tracking, you were telling the pilots, hey, I need you to come around, we need to make a pass, we need to drop, like 3 sonobuoys here, you're getting lots of data from your acoustic operators because they're telling you, hey, submarines next to these buoys, here's a bearing, very important for us was, Doppler, you have the Doppler shift, the submarine's coming towards, sonobuoy, it's up Doppler. If he's going away from the sonobuoy, kind of like when you're standing on the train platform, the train comes by, it's, high frequency as it comes towards you, and then it goes low frequency. Well, Doppler, really important for, tracking, submarines.
Directional.
Right. Because, hey, he's coming towards your buoy, hey, that's great, you're in front of him, right? When he's going away from your sonobuoy, now he's down Doppler, like now he's going away. You got to be able to get back in front of them. So a lot of data coming back from the air crew in the back. Frequencies, Doppler, bearings. Where is he at? Which buoy is the closest? Which is the farthest? Which buoys are still in contact? Because obviously buoys, after he goes past them, at some point in time you're going to lose. How long are your ranges of the day? Typically pretty short. So yeah, very, very, very busy because, you're talking to ordnance men, hey, I need, which buoys do I need, what type do I need, what, settings on the buoys, what depth and life, what, frequency, because you set, the channels on the side.
So they were pretty versatile to kind of dial into how you wanted them to react or perform for you.
Yeah, so very dynamic environment, so very much a crew, effort. Because, everybody's got a different job to do, and so, a really good crew, they're in sync, everybody's, not talking at the same time, but hey, here's something that's really important, here's the information right now, and then, you need to react to that. So that's, you're trying to coordinate the efforts of, all the people, inside the aircraft, so.
So you did, going back a bit, you did your majority of your training down in Pensacola?
Yes, yep.
What's the training entail?
So I'll, at least for your initial training, basic training was like, hey, just get in the aircraft.
So did you not go through Great Lakes?
No, I didn't. Yeah.
Okay, so you don't go through the regular Navy boot camp.
No,
You're,
yeah, because I had gone through ROTC,
Right, okay.
so I was a midshipman.
Yep.
And we got to go to do cool things in the summertime when we were in college. You get to
Okay.
go out on ship and get.
So you
to
had
go-
your taste already.
Yeah, so that
Okay.
we'd already kind of done that, and then Pensacola.
That would
you're
be more
there
your
for-
sea school.
Yeah, more just basic flight training, and then after basic flight training, actually, I was in Sacramento, California, at Mather Air Force Base to do like the navigation training, because you start out as a navigator. So that's
Okay.
where we did learn like how to navigate using the radar, how to do celestial navigation, how to do like that dead reckoning navigation, just plotting your time and speed, distance. So all of that training, but most of, I went through VP-30, that's the training squadron that's in Jacksonville, Florida, to actually learn how to fly like a P3 and to do like those basic navigator duties. And then later, as you're in the squadron, you're starting to, fleet up. So now you're starting to, hey, I'm doing this job, but now I need to watch, the more senior, NFO, like what's he doing as that tactical coordinator. And of course you have your personal qualification standard, your PQS, and you're filling out all your PQS and learning all the systems and all the jobs and what everybody does, in the aircraft. And then all the, the technical side of the house, how to run the system,
Right.
the software, the computer, and plot everything out on it, and then actually do all of that coordination. So you're constantly learning when you're in the squadron, and eventually you get, you have a board and you have a check flight, so very important to,
Sure.
make sure you pass all your tests,
Uh-huh.
and then you finally get qualified as a tactical, coordinator. So.
Is there any redundancy as far as you can jump into someone else's role if need be?
There was a little bit of that, not a lot.
Obviously not the pilots and flying,
not
but
the pilots,
but the technical, the guys in the back. You should be able to
try to learn at least like the basics of what's the radar operator doing, ESM, what's like the MAD system like. We had a camera system as well.
Okay.
Hey, how to operate the camera, that kind of thing.
Should you just have to be thrust into that role?
If you have
continuity of operation.
Every once in a great while, like there was a couple of times, you would have like a junior, member who wasn't like fully qualified, but doesn't necessarily need a lot of training. Sometimes I was, as an instructor, I'd be on the aircraft, and if somebody wasn't feeling good, you jump in the seat, like know enough to be dangerous, kind of thing.
Right.
Because this is my usual job. I'm like, hey, I can tune up buoys, and I can, look at the screen and tell you like, hey, here's a Doppler, here's, bearing line. I'm not really proficient at that, but again, I can, jump in a pinch, kind of thing.
Okay. Did you have your initial job as the flight officer? Had you aspired to do a different job on the aircraft, or had?
No, well, that's because that was kind of the rule that we were because I couldn't be a pilot, so there I was as a naval flight officer, and even though yes, there's two on the aircraft, but one's always like the junior person, learning how to do the job of the more senior person. So once you become the senior person, then you're looking to be, like an instructor, and, mission commander, and those kind of things.
Okay.
So you're kind of a little bit of a niche, but and it's a big community too, because here, once when I first joined, my first squadron, there were 24, P3 squadrons, because Cold War was still going on.
Yeah.
Anti-submarine warfare was, super important. There was, Soviet, submarines out there, ballistic missile submarines, aimed at the U.S. So ASW really important. But then, of course, this is, 1990.
Right.
By 1993, I was leaving my first squadron, and of course, our squadron was one of many that ended up being decommissioned. So I decommissioned my first, squadron, shut it all down, and everybody left, and everybody had to go find a new job. Fortunately, I was getting close to my normal kind of rotation to go do, a shore tour in the Navy. You do your sea duty, lots of deployments. My first deployments were to like Rota in Spain, lodges in the Azores, did a Keflavik, Iceland deployment.
Okay. Now, are those ship-based deployments, or are you?
No, those are land-based, like
bases.
P3, deployments.
Yeah. So P3, that never off a carrier?
Nope, never off a carrier.
Always land-based.
Too big, yep.
Okay.
All land-based,
Okay.
yep.
So when you got done with your training in Pensacola, do you stay there as your duty station, or where do you go from there?
Yeah, I ended up in Jacksonville, Florida, because that's where the P3s were based, at the time.
How long did you do there in Jacksonville?
So that's why my first squadron was a little over 3 years.
3 years.
From like 1990 to about the end of 1993.
Not a bad place to be flying.
So yeah, well,
nice scenery.
and we did a lot of East Coast deployments.
Yep.
Got a chance to fly in the Mediterranean, got a chance to fly in the Atlantic, got a chance to fly up in the North Atlantic.
Nice.
Out of Keflavik. So flew some of the early like counter narcotic missions. Out of Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. Everywhere on the Caribbean. Hunting for the drug smugglers that are coming out of
Now, was this back in the Noriega days?
Yes, yeah.
So any part of that, anything to do with those operations?
Not specifically, but
that you knew of?
yeah. Well, but I mean, there were, we definitely worked with like the Coast Guard, and we would go out, fly out over the Caribbean Ocean, look for suspicious looking vessels. You're like, hey, it's like a fishing boat, but how come it's just going north and they don't have any fishing nets on?
Doesn't look like they're throwing a line in the water.
Yeah, and like, what are they doing? And then and you would have lists of like suspect. Hey, here's a list of all the drug smuggling ships that we've seen in the area for however many years, and hey, look, it looks exactly like it. Oh, they painted it a different color, or they stuck fake little mast on it or whatever, and you could try to see through that, and then call the Coast Guard, and they would come in and stop them and inspect them and those kind of things. So, so we did a lot of, pretty good variety of different missions,
So this is going on.
First tour.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that was kind of like my first tour.
Okay. So this is going on, like you said, during the Cold War.
Yep.
So you're growing up when you're younger, it's, the Russians, we're going to send, they're going to send missiles. We're going to send missiles. The world's going to end. Was the gravity of hunting these ballistic missiles subs from the Russians, is the gravity of I'm on the forefront possibly of this Cold War?
And that's why, at that time, as we transitioned, the fall of, the Berlin Wall was happening, Soviet Union was starting to, to break up, so it was still like USSR, and there were ballistic missile submarines, and you're tracking them, and you're like, this is potentially, like a wartime mission.
Sure.
If something really bad happens, like, hey,
this could be it.
We typically would not, fly around with torpedoes, but, hey, if we needed to, that was one reason why, part of our job was, hey, we're always just constantly practicing for essentially a wartime, mission, because, hey, we're finding the submarines, we're tracking them, and and we're keeping really close tabs, and, wherever they go, that's where we go. And so, if something were, really serious to happen, then, we would then load up with torpedoes and not just sonobuoys, and then, we would go out, and, our job was to go find them and destroy them.
Them. Any close calls in that realm?
Well, no. I mean, we never had to, worry about, like, obviously we never went to war with, USSR. And then, of course, they were the Commonwealth of Independent States for a little while. And we tracked their submarines because they were the exact same submarines. They just changed their flag. And then there were Russian submarines because Commonwealth of Independent States went away. And it was the same submarines. We still tracked them, too. So, they just kept changing their flag, But, slowly over time, though, at least from a grand, strategic perspective, ASW started to become a little less important because they weren't coming out as often. They weren't deploying to all the normal places that they used to deploy to. And so their ability to send submarines out into the North Atlantic, decreased, slowly over time. So that's where, the P3, that classic, P3 Maritime Patrol, aviation mission became a little less important because, they,
just wasn't not need anymore.
Yeah, there was less of a importance for how often are they going to send a submarine out into the North Atlantic. They were doing that less and less, at that time.
So. But you would still fly your missions just in case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, well, I mean, they were still pretty active, up until like 1993.
Okay.
And then, and of course, by the time, I got back to my second, P3 squadron tour, it was all the way in like 2001 time frame. And then I was in the Pacific Ocean. I was flying out of Hawaii again. So I got to return to Hawaii, so that was nice. But yeah, that ASW mission was much less prevalent at that time because they just weren't deploying as often.
Okay. So after you leave your first duty station, you sit down in Jacksonville. Where do you go from there?
So I went and did an instructor tour, so a shore tour.
Okay.
In San Antonio, Texas, which was very nice, very rewarding.
Would that have been Lackland or?
I was at Randolph Air Force
Randolph,
Base.
okay.
Yeah, because I did it was kind of a joint tour, so I got a chance to fly with a whole bunch of Air Force people. So I really got a chance to, interact, as a joint, squadron.
And was the Air Force doing kind of any of the same things that you were doing as far as?
Yeah, and that's why we were a joint squadron because we were still training, people how to like navigate. At the time it was like the long range navigation. So we trained, Navy people primarily for like VQ, VP, those types of missions and aircraft, and then the Air Force they were training people for like B-52s and tankers and things like that. So we had a lot of commonality between the two, and it was really interesting to work with a whole bunch of Air Force navigators. At this time, this is like the mid '90s. A lot of them were from had participated in the first Gulf War as like B-52 navigators and like flew over Iraq in like 1991. In the first couple nights of the war, they had incredible stories about they
had some credibility.
What they had done. So it was pretty amazing to hear their experiences that they had flying like B-52s, because again a lot of them had kind of that Cold War experience. They'd been standing alerts, and then here they were, hey, you guys go, fly over Iraq and drop bombs. So here they got a chance instead of just, standing alert and hoping, or not hoping the klaxon never goes off, right?
Yeah.
Now they get a chance to like go to war for real, if you will.
Right.
So yeah, their perspective was definitely very interesting.
Right, those are the stories you listen to.
Experiences, yeah. Oh, absolutely. So,
popular guys at the party.
Yeah. So, but typical Navy career. After I did like that instructor tour, I went off to basically a sea duty tour, but not doing aviation. So I ended up on an aircraft carrier. So
Which carrier were you on?
So I was on USS Independence, CV-62 out of Yokosuka, Japan. So I was, part of the forward deployed naval force. So we were the last of the Forrestal class, aircraft carriers. So non-nuclear. So we were
old school.
Old, steam plant and
noisy,
burning oil. Yep, very noisy.
Yeah.
And we at the time we were the oldest, ship in the Navy. So, at that point in time, the Navy had a regulation that only like the oldest ship could fly, the "Don't Tread on Me," flag. So we had, we got to fly the "Don't Tread on Me," Jack.
Navy Jack, yeah.
So that was kind of unique for us because we were the, of course, you always have USS Constitution, in Boston, but that's the oldest, but we're the oldest, active, So
if you're on a ship, you're obviously not being a flight officer. What are your duties now? What are you doing on the ship?
I was a tactical action officer, so I was TAO, so somewhat similar, but at a much larger scale. Because I was in the Combat Direction Center, for the aircraft carrier. And so So you had, instead of like 10 people, you had like 30, 40, 50 people, much, larger group of people, because you had all of your, operations specialists. They'd be manning all of the consoles, inside combat, a lot of radar, a lot of tracking. So you had like a surface tracking group. You still had like an ASW group that would, plot out where all the submarines were and those kind of things. You usually had a pretty sizable, detection and tracking group. They manned all of our long-range, radars on the aircraft carrier, and they would track, inbound, targets and things like that. And then you had your air intercept control, group, a whole set of people that they, provided direction for all the fighters and that kind of thing. The air wing on board, they provided a lot of support for them. Did again a lot of air intercept control, which was fascinating. They hey, if we did really have like an inbound, hey, is it an enemy fighter? Is it unknown?
Yeah.
Hey, you'd send we still had F-14s at the time. You'd send your F-14s out or your F-18s out, and of course they would do in an exercise. You would have lots of super cool dogfights, and they would provide all kinds of direction to the because they got a radar, they got a big picture. They can say, hey, you've got 2 inbound or 4 inbound. Hey, they're splitting up. They provide a lot of situational awareness for the pilots in the aircraft. So they're not trying to, hey, where is everybody? That's always half the battle. Is who's
where?
who? Yeah, where are the friendlies? Where are the bad guys?
And still have to fly this plane.
And they still have to do all of the normal. Hey, I got to fly the plane. So yeah, and of course you interacted with like the officer of the deck, the air wing boss, because the aircraft carrier is doing flight ops. You're tracking all of your own flight ops, and of course you're also working with the admiral staff. Usually had the carrier battle group because carrier is never all by itself. You always got Aegis cruisers and destroyers and other support aircraft and submarine or support ships, submarines. So you're as that tactical action officer, you're there in combat with lots of radios, lots of radars, lots of data coming in. And you're trying to coordinate the activities of all these different people. To maintain kind of that situational awareness. And then you're trying to provide basically recommendations to the captain, because the captain, he's ultimately in charge, the ship, so like, hey, do we need to shoot at somebody, to defend the ship, or not, because you're the tactical action officer would actually have control over, we have missiles, self-defense missiles, and CWIS, so those kind of and passive measures as well. So so you're in charge of all of that, and you need to provide, again, those recommendations to the captain. Tell him, hey, this is what's going on.
You're his eyes, pretty much.
Yeah, here's the situation, here's, our recommendation, and then the captain can go, yeah, go ahead and do this, don't do that, shoot, don't shoot, and of course you also had the admiral staff on board too, and you're trying to coordinate with all the other ships in the battle group as well, so, because you got lots of data links, lots of radios, a lot of ways to pass, information back and forth between what you're doing and what they can see as well, because of course Aegis cruisers and destroyers, they have all kinds of sensors
Advanced,
and radars and everything else too, and you're trying to work together as a battle group. So
now, is that when that Aegis system was relatively new?
This was like late '90s, so it was pretty well established, and had a lot of really well known capabilities. So
what was your impression on that Aegis system?
Yeah, really neat. I got later in my career, I got a chance to, I was an instructor at the Surface Warfare School, and I got a chance to really work really closely with a lot of surface warfare, officers, who had done a lot of service on, cruisers and destroyers. So they had a lot of experience with Aegis, because I did not, not as, on the aircraft carrier, we didn't have that, but, obviously they did.
They did.
So yeah, really fascinating system that had, a lot of, really great capabilities when it comes to, hey, they have to be able to track, control all of their missiles, do that air warfare mission.
Oh yeah.
So they were ultimately, more capable at doing that than, the aircraft carrier.
And they're still using it today. So I mean, it must be good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So,
Awesome.
so they've been around. But that was kind of, since here we are talking about kind of like wartime experiences.
Yeah.
I was in, Japan. We were stationed in Yokosuka, Japan. The forward deployed naval force. They're there in case, anything were to happen in Taiwan or Korea.
Yep.
Well, this was, Saddam, this was the late 90s. So like 1997, time frame, Saddam Hussein, was kicking UN weapons inspectors out of his country. Tensions are ramping up in the Arabian Gulf. And, a lot
of saber rattling.
And our aircraft carrier and our whole carrier battle group. We were always on a 3-day notice. If we could get the call, hey, get on the way within 3 days. Get out to sea,
right.
And we had to be ready to go. And sure enough, it was over the holidays. A whole bunch of people are on a leave. And yep, we got a call. Hey, get on the way 3 days. Go to the Arabian Gulf as fast as you can go. And so that's what we did.
That's what you did.
So, yep. So we got to the Arabian Gulf, and then I think he let the UN's inspectors back in, and then we were when we first arrived in the Gulf, at the time we were pretty convinced, like, oh yeah, this is gonna be really serious because there was Nimitz, Carl Vinson, and then the the British, the Royal Navy, are close allies.
Yep.
They had I'm trying to remember, was it Invincible? They had HMS Invincible was in the Gulf.
Okay.
I did get a chance to actually go on board Invincible. That was really neat.
Wow.
They had one of their Harrier, aircraft carriers. And so, we had 4 aircraft carriers like in the Gulf, like all at once.
Yeah, which you never see that many carriers in one spot.
You're like, oh yeah, everybody had to be in their own little area, so we had enough room to operate, and all these planes flying around doing the whole Southern Watch.
Oh man, yeah.
So, and here we are. And this is the first time that I got a chance to earn some tax-free money in a combat tax exclusion zone. And
nice, huh?
Nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
Yep. And all the other carriers left, and we were the last ones kind of standing, and then somebody came and replaced us. But,
exciting there for a little bit.
so was it really? And then it was kind
Very
of the
anticlimactic.
classic. Yeah, it was classic. Like lots of not really very exciting. But it's one of those things. You're super busy. Because every day you're doing 12 hours worth of flight ops. So
Sure.
and we got a beer day. We got to have we had been out at sea long enough, and we weren't scheduled to come in the port. We got to have like the Steel Beach picnic.
Yep.
We got our 2 beers per person. So and you got to eat some steaks and some hamburgers and whatnot out on the flight deck. So
kind of feel a little normal for a day.
Cooks came up and set up big grills,
Nice.
and everybody got to hang out on the flight deck, for the day, So
very cool.
and we got our
You
2
got your 2
beers.
beers. Only 2.
Yeah, only 2. Only
Right.
2. So, but we got a beer day. So but
It's essentially a day off.
you kind of you're still sailing around, and you're not flying, so at least all the pilots and all the squadron and all the maintainers, they kind of got a chance to have a little bit of a break, and things we were less busy than we normally were.
How long did you hang around in the Gulf there before you had?
So about 6 months we were in the Gulf, and then we sailed back to Japan, and then we were being decommissioned. So as soon as we got back to Japan, we spent like almost no time, in port. A lot of people were getting orders to go to other places.
Right.
So like wives and families, they're packing up their household goods and move in and everything else. And then we sailed to Hawaii and did a turnover with Kitty Hawk.
Okay.
And then she took our place, in Japan, and then we sailed off to Bremerton, Washington, and we had decommissioned, put
Say
it
goodbye.
in mothballs,
Yeah.
and it's been turned into scrap metal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So kind of sad from that perspective.
Yeah, but also maybe something a little satisfying to be on the final cruise of a ship, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, so and we were performing, again, an important mission. I mean, here we got the call, know, like, hey, where's the aircraft carriers? The classic, like, yeah, we were being ordered there by the president, essentially, right? So
you weren't just sitting in port
so
somewhere,
we weren't
and all of a
just,
sudden you're done.
like, yeah, exactly. So we,
Nice.
the Navy got a lot of use out of that aircraft carrier right before they they put it away.
Right.
So
as what is intended to do. So it's satisfying.
Yep.
So where did you go after that?
So after that, I was at the postgraduate school in Monterey, the Navy postgraduate school, and I got a master's degree in oceanography.
Oh.
As part of that anti-submarine warfare. So I had a lot of expertise. So I got to spend 2 years in Monterey, which was fantastic.
Nice.
And then I did my department head tour, P3s, and I got to go back to Hawaii, where I was born.
Comes full circle.
A little bit of a full circle. So there I am flying P3s out of Marine Corps Base Hawaii, because P3s originally had been based in Barbers Point, on the leeward side of the island, over by Pearl Harbor, and then Barbers Point had been closed down, part of the whole BRAC, and then they'd moved the P3s, to the other side of the island, and they were based out of Marine Corps Base Hawaii, right in Kaneohe Bay. So everybody just called it K-Bay, because we were at Kaneohe Bay, Marine Corps Base Hawaii. So, we had 3 squadrons there. I was with, at that time, VP 47. So, and that's where, more wartime experiences, because, I'm there in Hawaii when 9/11 happens.
That was good. That was be my next question. So I was going to say, do you remember where you were in 9/11?
Yep.
Hawaii. So how did you guys find out? Were you watching it on TV or?
Well, that was, because, obviously all the events happen,
early
on the, East Coast time, relatively early in the morning, East Coast time. Well, Hawaii is, like 8 hours behind.
Yeah.
So I think it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. My brother calls me, and I wake up, in the middle of the night, and he's like, hey, you need to turn on your TV, check this out, kind of thing, and I've like turned on my TV, and then they're showing the replays of obviously the planes flying into the towers, and I grew up in New Jersey, so I was pretty familiar with what the New York skyline looks like, and here's the World Trade Center being attacked. I remember as a really little kid in like the early 70s, like going into the city every once in a while with like my father, and the World Trade Center were still being built at the time. Yep. And then here they are getting destroyed by 767s flying into them. So
what was your initial thought when you're seeing this?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was horrified, of course, and knew that that was obviously super serious.
And you're already in the military, so
I'm already in the military, so I'm thinking
this is going to need a response.
This is going to be. We're probably going to war now. Kind of like later in that morning, because I knew I called in like the duty office, and of course duty office. They're like, yep, we, as much as we do, kind of thing, but I was like, well, I'll put on my uniform, I'll go in, see what's going on, kind of thing, and hey, there's probably going to be something, for us to do eventually. Yeah. Of course, I'm at Marine Corps Base Hawaii. The Marines are highly motivated.
Yes, they are.
Trained professionals, as they usually are. And so, I remember driving up to, I lived off base, and usually I wouldn't go in the main gate. I would go in the back gate, because I was closest to where I lived. And it's pretty quiet, main gate, or the back gate of Kaneohe Bay. And I'm driving my little Honda, and I kind of roll up towards the back gate, and the Marines are there. They are there in full force.
Ready to go.
Yep, they've got their armored amphibious vehicles out. I can see they've got lots of 50 calibers mounted on top.
Maybe I should go to the main gate.
I just kind of I slow down, stop my car, I get out, I walk over. There's like a staff sergeant there, and I'm like, hey, good morning, Staff Sergeant. And he's like, good morning, sir. I'm like, it looks like I'm not getting on base today. He's like, no, sir, you are not getting on base. We have orders. The base is closed. Nobody in, nobody out.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it's everything shut down. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, thank you, Staff Sergeant. You have a great day.
Wow.
Kind of thing. And yeah, so security was excellent at Marine Corps Base Hawaii. So they were definitely fully prepared for anything that might happen. So
how long do you remain there post 9/11 in Hawaii?
So like,
do your orders change, or does your mission change because of that?
Our mission definitely changed. I got a chance to fly, in the next couple of days. We were ordered to go out and do, maritime patrols around the islands.
Okay.
Just in case.
Who knows what the next target's going to be?
Who knows? Like Al Qaeda, they captured, a cargo ship and loaded it with explosives or some crazy thing. They're going to sail it into Pearl Harbor. Who knows? Wild rumors.
Right.
And so we're doing patrols. So it was one of those. There was no other, air traffic. So here it is. We're flying. Our P3. We're looking at merchant ships that are coming into the islands. And like
probably one of the very
it's a merchant ship, and you're like, what can you say, but there's like F-15s flying and like an AWACS and a tanker, and that's it. We're literally the only thing like in the air anywhere in the Hawaiian Islands. It's like, normally you'd have, all kinds of airliners, coming in and going, and listening to air traffic control.
Silence. I can imagine.
It was kind of eerie because you're like, they're talking to like the AWACS and us, and that's it. Nobody else.
Right.
Nobody. So that was kind of freaky, if you will. So
how long do you do that over there as far as post 9/11 Hawaii?
Yeah. So our squadron gets ready. We go on deployment. We do kind of a Japanese Western Pacific deployment. So we're based out of Kadena in Okinawa.
Okay.
We're based up in Misawa, up in northern Japan.
Okay.
But it's now post 9/11, it's big, huge attention, the global war on terror, terrorism. So a big, part of our deployment there, we go on deployment for a little over 6 months. Our squadron had a constant presence down in the southern Philippines because there were, Abu Sayyaf terrorists, down operating in Mindanao and south of Mindanao. So I got a chance to, go on detachment, and we'd fly some of our P3s down to Mactan, which is basically a commercial and Philippine Air Force base on the island of Cebu. And then we'd fly out of Cebu. Similar to like our earlier ASW missions, we'd fly like 10-hour-long missions, but they were all overland reconnaissance flights because we had a really nice camera system with lots of radios, and we could talk to all kinds of different people. Our acoustic operators were bored silly because we didn't drop any sonar buoys at all. But we were providing a lot of support for special forces on the ground that were trying to hunt down terrorists. So we were looking for like terrorist camps out in the jungle. Terrorists were using some small boats to go back and forth in between like the Holo Island and Basilan Island and the southern parts of Mindanao and some of the smaller islands in that area. So we were trying to track all the little boats and fishing boats and whatnot and see, if we could track people down. And
lots of fishing boats over there.
A lot of fishing boats.
No easy task.
Yeah, a big task. But the Abu Sayyaf terrorists, they had actually, kidnapped some American missionaries. So there were, special forces on the ground. So we were working with them, and eventually special forces were able to, rescue, some of the missionaries and, kill some of the Abu Sayyaf terrorists. so from that perspective, it was,
rewarding
success,
to be part of something like that.
Rewarding to be
absolutely,
part of that, sort of mission, and once again, we were in a combat tax exclusion zone, so I got to, earn more of that tax-free money.
Makes it just a little sweeter, doesn't it?
So if you're like, hey, is this like a wartime mission? Well, it's combat tax exclusion zone.
What does my pay stub say?
Yeah, it says combat on it, so I guess so.
Why not?
So that was the, and of course, we're a squadron, we're flying in and out, so, we would always try to reward the sailors that, were coming up on like re-enlistment, they're signing a new contract, maybe they get a bonus, so if you could, fly them into the combat tactics exclusion zone, and they could sign their re-enlistment papers, and then their bonus would be tax-free.
So you were the guys to know.
We were, well, I mean, that's, a great benefit for them, why not if you have that ability to do that. So if we had, people in the squadron, hard-working maintainers, because obviously you can't fly the plane unless you've got, because the squadron's pretty big. You got, a couple hundred people that are there, to help maintain, fix, repair, all the logistics, for, fixing and maintaining, operating those aircraft. It's not just, the air crew, of course.
Right.
So people that they're working 12-hour days too, they, literally 12 on, 12 off, right? For the whole deployment. Yeah. So if they, are getting re-enlisted, like, let's fly them down to MAC-10 for the day, they can, fix something, and then they can fly, they can sign their paper, and they can fly home. Nice. Well, fly home, fly back to like Kadena or whatever. So like, hey, well, why not, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you would have appreciated if somebody did that for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, post 9/11, this is probably coming towards the end of your Navy career.
So, so somewhat, I got out of, that was my second, squadron tour, flying P3s. So great fun, very rewarding, loved flying, inside the aircraft. I then went and did a shore tour, and I was actually ended up in Newport, Rhode Island. I was at the Surface Warfare School for a couple of years. But then after that, this is now in late 2006. I am getting close to the end of my career, but my next tour is going to be a sea duty, tour. And then so I end up in Patuxent River, Maryland, at the Naval Air Station there. But I'm actually, one of the OICs of a UAV det. That's, in Pax River. We're actually part of Fleet Composite Squadron 6. VP6 was actually headquartered in Norfolk, Virginia. And the main squadron, they were the ones that fired all the target drones for the ships in Norfolk to shoot down, during exercises. But we were part of that, composite squadron, and we had a small group of people, in Pax River that at the time they had, previously, we had actually some really cool, pictures like hanging out in our hangar spaces at Webster Field, a small little outlying auxiliary field south of the main, base in, Southern Maryland, because that, VC6, that UAS, det, they were the ones that flew like, Pioneer UAVs, during like the initial Gulf War. They were the ones that flew, the little remote control UAVs to spot.
The ones that you launched from the field.
Well, they launched them off the back of the battleships.
Oh, wow.
So we had some really cool pictures of, our predecessors, in like 2001, launching UAVs off the back of, the Iowa class battleships that were, firing shells into Kuwait City, and they were,
wow.
They had a little launcher system that would fire them off, then they'd fly around, and then they'd spot, for the naval gunfire support, and then they'd come back, and they actually, how they recovered them on the back of the battleship, they actually flew them into a big net. They'd raise a big, huge net.
Oh, no kidding.
Wow. And they fly it into a net, and that's how they recovered them on the battleship.
Huh.
So
now you would
obviously I never did that.
Right.
But that was one of the things that particular little outfit had done. Over many years. They had done a lot of UAVs. For like the large like amphibs, like the LHAs and things like that. And, that was kind of like their history of that, particular little, small detachment.
Interesting.
So, but I get there and I check into the squadron and I leave the very next day because the squadron had been tasked as part of the big surge for, in late 2006, early 2007, to go to Iraq to provide like maximum support for the ground troops. So here we were, a small detachment with a lot of, unmanned, aerial reconnaissance, expertise. And so, myself and, about, 45 other people. We were tasked with JCS orders, Joint Chairman Chief of Staff orders to go to. We were going to use an Army system, even though we were Navy. We're actually going to go borrow an Army UAS system. So we went to Fort Huachuca down in Arizona, and we got some training on this Army, UAS system. It was the RQ-7 Shadow. So small, little tactical UAV. Each air vehicle was about like 350 pounds, about like 17-foot wingspan. Little Wankel, a rotary engine, like a little Mazda, like RX-7, little Wankel engine, propeller-driven, rear engine.
And these are unarmed. These are just reconnaissance.
Totally unarmed, pure reconnaissance. So we did, intel, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR, which, of course, I, had done a whole bunch of, on my previous P3 deployment in the Philippines. Here we'd flown over land for, hours on end, searching for things on the ground. Well, surveillance and reconnaissance, like inside the aircraft and sitting in the back of a Humvee controlling a remote control aircraft. Pretty much the exact same thing, right? Like all the principles, all are the same. You're just not in the aircraft anymore. But you're still, flying it. It was all autopilot. You just had to press software buttons. So, but the real challenge was actually driving the camera around. That was actually the hard part. That actually took like real hand-eye coordination, skills. Was actually driving,
get good pictures and good
getting
images.
really good pictures, getting really good images. Flying over your target deck. Capturing all kinds of data. And driving that camera system around.
And at this point, that's coming back real time.
Yeah. That's all real time because that's full motion video, FMV. That was demand was totally unlimited.
Okay.
So we get to do our training, and then we go off to Iraq, and we're stationed out of Balad, air base north of Baghdad, and we're working for a joint command. Task force, and their mission is to go out and capture as many Al-Qaeda in Iraq as they can possibly can. So that's our mission. So we flew 24/7. I mean, we had 4 air vehicles, so we could keep one airborne all the time. So we flew in orbit. So we flew literally all day, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had one eye in the sky, orbiting overhead, something, wherever we were tasked to go.
Okay. So they were going to do a mission somewhere. They needed some pre-surveillance. Boom.
Yep. And
hey,
we would
go.
And so we were supporting troops on the ground that were going in and hitting targets. Not necessarily every night, but like night after night. And we were providing all of the because they needed to know like. What's in that area, like what's the building like, how many, it's a 2 stories, 3 stories, 1 story, how many windows, how many doors, how many people are there dogs and cats and cows and, whatever, anything and everything. Are there trees nearby? There's a road nearby. Are there cars, go by? Is it a busy road? Not a busy road.
You could paint a picture for those guys like they were there.
Yep. You're trying to get, that daily life kind of thing, that pattern of life. Like, hey, like, oh yeah, people get up in the morning, they're out, milking the goats or not, or like, they sleep up on the roof. Or they don't sleep up on the roof, because it's hot in Iraq. They don't have any air conditioning. So how many people are up on the roof? Are there like women and children? Is it all, the military age, male? Is it only, hey, a whole bunch of, 20-year-olds, men, with guns? Are there any guns? Are you seeing any guns? No guns. I mean, which way is like the door open? Do they have a fence? Do they not have a fence? How tall is the fence?
And how high are these things? Are these flying at?
Yeah, so we usually fly, where they would be hard for someone to like see us. So we'd fly at like 4,000 or 5,000 feet.
But still have laser sharp images.
Yeah, we had a pretty good camera. It wasn't as nice as like the one in our in our P3, but it was a nice camera system. So so we could see. We couldn't see like faces. But you could see like people and that kind of thing. Like
enough for what they needed.
And we could see, and we had night. We had an infrared system and a regular daytime camera, so we could see at night, daytime. It didn't make any difference to us. So, but and of course it was from my from my perspective, here I'm in charge. I'm the officer in charge of this small little detachment. I got like 25 sailors working for me. From a leadership perspective, it was easy, if you will, because it's a tough mission. It's really hot. It's sometimes tedious. Like, hey, you just circle over a house for days on end till something finally happens. Right. I mean, people are bored. But you're supporting troops on the ground that are probably eventually going to go hit that house. Right.
Sure.
And so, to keep people motivated, people knew that this was, a really important mission, because, hey, they needed to know every single thing that they could possibly know about that.
As safe as you can.
Because, if they didn't know that, the door's open outward, no, they open inward, no, there's a lock on the door, there isn't a lock on the door. If they don't know those things, that can be, again, life-changing for them because, they're
Absolutely.
not, they find out the hard way that, hey, there's something that's there that they didn't take into account, that they didn't plan for. So that was, from a, our, the people that we work for, they knew that, yep, they are super skilled, highly trained, professionals, with incredible skills, that, they're literally going to go kick in the door and, drag people out. But if they don't know where to go, well, then, how do you use them? So that was part of our mission was, hey, find out everything we possibly can so that way, those guys can go out and do their job, and do it successfully. So.
Right. How long is your tour over there for this one?
So I did my first deployment. It was, about 8 months long or so.
Okay.
And then we rotated out. And of course, once again, another unit that I was decommissioning.
Oh, wow.
So
At some point, do you think, is it me?
Yes, because I did 2 squadrons, a ship, training unit. You're like, okay, so I'm kind of like the kiss of death, maybe. I don't know, but yes. Our units, winded down. So, we had planned like, hey, one group of people are going to go, then we're going to rotate out. Another group of people are going to go. But then we got extended. And so they're like, hey, we need volunteers. I was like, hey, I was getting close to retirement as well. So I was like, hey, I'll, what else am I going to do? Kind of thing, And I knew, obviously, super important mission. Here we are getting extended. A lot of people had been in the squadron like before me. They're rotating out. Our squadron's decommissioning. So I'm like, hey, I'll stay, right? So I didn't stay in Iraq, but I came back, was back home for a little while. And then I actually had to request volunteers, who else out of all the people that have been in Iraq, because instead of having 2 units, we were going to get extended, but we only needed 1. So I canvassed the other detachments that had been there and said, hey, who wants to volunteer? And we in some cases, surprisingly enough, we literally had to actually turn some people away.
Wow.
Enough people were like, yeah, I'll go. And so because that kind of shows you how, at least from a professional rewarding perspective, tough mission, it's in Iraq, it's really hot, it's you're away from family, and you're super busy, you're working 14 hours a day every single day, but hey, people knew how important it was.
Right.
So we actually,
refreshing to see.
Yeah, so actually getting volunteers to go back for another 8-month-long deployment, you might think that would be challenging, but it's kind of surprising even for myself. I was like, I'll go, right? Because I was one of 4 of the detachment officers, and I was the only one that volunteered to go back. But you only needed 1, so. But yeah, we literally had to turn. I had my senior enlisted chief, incredible guy, fantastic guy. He was like, yep. He was like, I'm going to go ask a whole bunch of people. And he was like, yeah, we got too many people. I was like, really?
Not a bad problem to have, right?
How can that be? Yeah, how can that be?
Wow.
So we could kind of pick and choose a little bit.
Nice.
But yeah, so we go back to Iraq.
Same plot, same spot?
No, we had been in the squadron had been in Balad and then up in Mosul. I'd been down in Balad, north of Baghdad, so we'd done all kinds of operations over Baghdad. And then we got extended up in Mosul, so now we're up in Mosul and we're doing missions, up in Mosul. Okay. So at least for me, it was little bit different operating area. So
Right.
I got to see, more parts of Iraq.
Right.
So you could say whether
I'm
that's
sure
good
they
or
probably
bad.
look a lot the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of it looks the same, but very similar mission, still working for the same,
Right.
task force.
Okay.
So
So you're very familiar with the task at hand.
yeah,
From your first.
yeah, and in this case, yeah, I've got a lot of. I did actually get a chance that we had trained some people that were going to be, kind of like backup in case somebody got hurt or injured or whatever. Like, hey, you're going to stay, in Patuxent River, but in case we need you, we'll take you over there. So most of my people on my second deployment were people that had been to Iraq before, but not everybody. We had some of the, like our backup people that, they almost felt like they'd missed out, right? So,
Right.
and they were like some of the first people to volunteer, like, oh, I want to go,
Right.
because now I actually
want to
get a
get in
chance
on this.
yeah,
Sure.
So, I mean, they may not have been, super thrilled to, go spend time in 120-degree heat in the desert,
Right.
and spend all that time away from their family. But at least they were, pretty, motivated again by the mission. So
Right.
they knew that, hey, again, it was an important mission that, hey, somebody's got to do it. So, hey, we had the training to do it, and in this case, we already had experience doing it. So, like, yeah, why not us, right?
So does this second deployment take you up to your retirement?
Yes. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I had already submitted my, retirement paperwork, before, I'd even gone on like my first deployment because you submit it like years, year plus in advance, so that, hey, when they give you your date and you got to do all your paperwork and et cetera. And
No interruptions.
Yeah, I got tasked to go back, and I'm like, hey, my orders to go to Iraq are now past like my retirement date. Like, now what?
Right.
And the people that I was working for, they're like, oh yeah, don't worry about that. We'll fix that.
Oh, yeah.
Because they had enough pull that so I was extended on active duty in a retired status on my second deployment.
For the entirety of your second deployment?
Not the whole thing,
Okay.
but for a couple extra months because I needed enough time to then come back after the end of our deployment and then do all of those checkout things and fill out all your paperwork, et cetera, and do your physicals and all of those kind of things, your transition things. But yeah, so my official retirement date actually came and went while I was in Iraq. So, and then I had a couple extra months once I came back from my second deployment.
So when you came back from that second deployment, where do you come stateside before you say goodbye to the Navy?
I came back to Patuxent River.
Back to Patuxent,
So,
okay.
So yeah, and then we had to obviously turn in all of our gear and turn in our Army equipment. So that was obviously very important since I had signed for like $17 million worth of Army equipment.
And they want it back.
The Army really, really wanted their equipment back.
Yes,
so
there
I
were
couldn't just
people.
like, just take that home with me. Like, no, you weren't taking anything home with you. I found out the Army, they're very particular about their inventory sheets. We literally the system as a whole, all kinds of, we had Humvees and launching equipment and maintenance equipment and of course the air vehicles themselves and all kinds of accoutrements. We had tents and all kinds of things, and they
want it back.
It was like a 60-page inventory, that you went through every little bit and piece,
And it's not all in the same place, right?
It's
spread
because
out.
you had multiple vehicles and trailers and launchers and maintenance, equipment and everything. Yeah, it took about 3 days to inventory everything.
Wow.
Yep. So, and if you woe unto you if you were missing something, because that was bad. Because you were gonna have to figure out a way to find it or pay for it. So,
finding it's better.
yes, finding a way better. Yes.
I don't think you had $17 million.
No, I did. I was like, that's really going to impact my retirement pay.
Right. How would you say that your military experience has affected your life?
So yeah, I would, definitely, obviously I did it for 20 years, and then, I was hired on as a contractor to support the Navy, afterwards as well. So yeah, pretty much, all of my, career, all of my professional career has all been either in the Navy, as active duty, or supporting the Navy outside the Navy. So yeah, it's, a huge impact, obviously I got a chance to live all over the world, fly all over the world, so, obviously my wife, got a chance to move all over the world as well. Some places nicer, some places maybe not quite so nice, but overall, we got a chance to, see, an awful lot of, interesting, parts of the planet. That's for sure. So yeah, a huge impact, and, as always, it's, it's the people that you're working with. That's the part that you really remember.
Right, and that theme rings true on a lot of the interviews we do here. It's not the day-to-day stuff. It's the interactions and the interpersonal things that you do.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's probably like one of the takeaways. Like it's if you're working with good people that you enjoy interacting with, then it's not really work, right? You're going to work and you get to like jump in the plane and go flying, right. And you're with your crew and you've been with them before, and you're having everyone knows their job, and you're not necessarily having fun per se, but right. Hey, it's enjoyable, it's rewarding. Hey, you're doing your mission, and hey,
another family.
Yeah, and honestly, it is like your family. Yeah.
Theoretically, let's say, we're sitting down here, sitting in front of a camera right now, recording this. Say several generations down the line, great grandchildren are going to watch this one day. What's one thing you'd want them to know about your military experience?
That's a good question. I never looked at it from that perspective, I guess. But I don't know. I just I'll have to think about that one. That's a tough one. What would they know? It's just it's interesting to see, try to appreciate, history, in aviation history, and you get a chance to look at like World War II, things like that, like huge, epic events, and again, the personal stories from like individuals, like what they experience. Right. I think that's kind of the similar kind of like takeaway, that, my experience is always going to be different from anybody else's experience.
Sure.
But yeah, and, here, I got to see, pretty significant span of like history, even in my community, like the Maritime Patrol Reconnaissance, aviation community, MPRA. Like we went from the Cold War mission, tracking, Soviet submarines to, flying, overland surveillance, and, doing almost nothing but that, and now we're, the P8 community, which took over for the P3s, is now, starting to transition back to doing like ASW. So in some things, you see things, kind of come full circle a little bit.
Sure. Interesting.
But I guess that's from a, that everybody's, experience is going to be different, but, at the same token, like, you get a, if you're in the military, you get a chance to do, some really interesting things, but that are also very meaningful. That's not just, yourself, you're doing.
Do you speak to the young people today? Would you recommend military service?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm the first one to tell you that, it's not for everyone. I definitely, obviously have had, a lot of, experiences with a lot of people, a lot of sailors, in the Navy that, hey, that Navy wasn't for them or wasn't for their family, they, got out of the Navy, but I think overall, the vast majority of people, even the people that like, hey, I can't do 20 years in the Navy, because they're married and they got a whole bunch of kids, and hey, maybe that's not the right, environment for their family. But even then, they'll usually tell you that, it was, rewarding, experience.
Is there anything else that you'd like to document today about your experience that we didn't talk about?
Oh, I got a million sea stories that are usually involve, hey, we flew someplace, we went out of town, we did lots of partying, and then, we had to get back to base, before, our, 12-hour cutoff in our aviation community so that we could then go flying the next day. But yeah, maybe not the most appropriate sea stories.
Those are the best ones though, right? Well, sir, I'd like to thank you for sitting down and speaking with me today. I'd like to thank you for your service.
Yep, thank you.
On behalf of the Americans in Wartime Experience, thank you.
All right, thanks.